And welcome to Dr. David Klein. Today, we're talking relative risk. Now, I've got some relatives, but I don't know how much of a risk they are.
Tick them off the wrong way and you'll find out.
That's right.
Okay, I got some relatives that make me anxious to this day. However, what is relative risk? And it's an approach to life. It's an approach to risk management. It's an approach to many different things in business and around your family. What is a relative risk? A relative risk implies that you have a finite, that's a measurable risk of any particular event throughout a lifetime. Okay, so let's say that you have a risk of breast cancer, 9%. Okay, if you're female. If you're male, it's 1/10 of 1%, roughly. So you have a 9% lifetime risk of developing breast cancer. If you were to increase your relative risk by 10%, well, that increases your risk by 10%. It sounds awful. Your risk would go to 9.9% instead of 9%. That's still high. You went from 9% to 10%. Not as awful as it might sound for doing what you might otherwise need to do to lead a healthier life. Let's say heart disease. Okay, you're eating meat. Okay, and you have a 1 chance in 30 of developing cardiovascular disease. It increases your relative risk by 10%. Okay, that's 1 chance in 27 instead of 1 chance in 30. Again, it doesn't sound so bad, does it? If you look at your relative risks and add them all up, then you assess what your lifestyle is going to be all about. Okay, this sounds kind of arcane, but it's rather interesting. Why do I care about relative risk? Because people make a great deal out of small problems. So let's say that you're going to go ahead and you're going to cook in a microwave, and you heard from somebody that, gee, if you cook in a microwave, it's going to generate or off-gas things from the plastic utensils, which might increase your risk, keyword, might increase your risk of cancer. By what? Okay, by a relative risk of 0.00001. If your relative risk was 1 in 38 to 50,000, and now it's 1 risk in 22 to 28,000, did it meaningfully change your life? If it decreased the amount of money you're going to spend over your lifetime in terms of energy consumption, heating your house, and so on and so forth, let alone the convenience of heating your food safely, you'll realize that much was made of nothing. So that's the way we look at life. And one of the things I pay attention to on a daily basis is cancer risk. So what does it take to moderate your cancer risk? So if you're a female with breast cancer, okay, and then you take bioidentical hormone replacement, you would think that this would be a terrible idea, when in fact the statistics don't suggest that there's any change in your risk of developing cancer again in your lifetime, nor does it necessarily change your survivability. When looking at relative risk rather than looking at emotion, you begin to realize that maybe those night sweats, maybe the osteoporosis, maybe the fact that your brain isn't working so well is not a great price to pay in order to allay your fears. So hormone replacement therapy is something that we look at with relative risk all the time. Let's look at diabetes. Okay, so before you develop frank diabetes, your blood sugar is 140, your weight's heavy and all this other stuff, the doctor will tell you, well, you'll reduce your likelihood of continuing to be diabetic if you reduce your weight. Well, guess what? Okay, there are things that you can do to lower your blood sugar, lower your weight at the same time, but also decrease your risk of cancer. That's moderation and modulation of relative risk. Diabetics are far more likely to develop cancer than are non-diabetics. So if you're going to reduce your risk, that would be the focus of what you're doing. So why do you really care what your blood sugar is doing? Because the blood sugar, not only does it feed your healthy cells, but it also feeds cancer cells. This is a big problem. So how do you reduce your risk of cancer? Lower your blood sugar, but also lower your insulin. So one of my favorite things is to look up a particular literature search, and that's how do you prevent melanoma? There are very few things that will help prevent or reduce your risk of melanoma. Metformin is one of the few that will do it. Metformin reduces your risk of melanoma. Well, that's a big deal here in Florida. Why? Because melanoma risk is real. The brighter the sunshine, the more direct the sunlight, the greater the risk. You're looking at something that may cause some upset stomach. The worst risk you'll see is weight loss, a little diarrhea, temporary, but moderating your relative risk is what it's all about. If you cut your cancer risk in half, that's very, very meaningful. If you cut your risk by 1/100th of 1%, that's not so terribly meaningful. So why do we care about this? Because as you're going through life and as you're spending your money, as you're spending your time, you need to spend it wisely. So let's look at relative risk in terms of your physical activities. You go out in the sun, you're going to play tennis, okay? So the sun is beating down on you. You increase your risk of skin cancer. Where do these skin cancers typically occur? In men on the top of their head and the top of their ears. That's where the sun is most direct. So we instruct our patients to put their lotions on, their SPF 50 and so on and so forth. We also instruct them to put them on once an hour because you will sweat them off. But you're going to be out in the sun far longer than that. How many people actually stop what they're doing to reapply their SPF 50s to the areas where they're most likely to develop these skin cancers? Okay, by the time you're in your 60s or 70s, okay, your skin, if exposed to the sun for this length of time, is already pretty darn leathery, isn't it? Okay, you may look like a wallet, okay, to many people that are out there. Relative risk of skin exposure is something that builds. It's additive over time. You can't rewind the clock. It doesn't work real well. But you can reduce further risk of other sorts of more meaningful neoplasms to include melanoma and basal cell carcinoma. So getting out of the sun is important. Now, what about, you're still out there playing tennis, right? Okay, you're playing tennis, you're in your 60s, you might be a little bit older than that. What's the risk of dropping with a heart attack? People drop dead, okay, on tennis courts all the time. They drop dead on golf courses all the time. Why? Because of dehydration. It increases your risk of sudden death. So these are very, very real risks, and yet these very, very same people are out there arguing some of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. Okay, they'll go out there and they'll increase their risk of fire hazard in their home, okay, by looking for natural fibers, okay, that are highly flammable, okay, worrying about off gases, which are, it's insanity. Okay, a lot of people die every year from home fires, yet very, very few people get sick from these volatile off gases. It's insane. Small problem is a small problem is a small problem. It's a theoretical problem. But when you're making decisions in your life that are very real, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't make any sense at all. Small problem is a small problem. So what a relative risk is, the take-home message here is this, is that if your risk is small, and you increase that risk by doubling it, it's still a small risk. Okay? Very, very simple. A small risk doubled is still a small risk, and a very small risk or a remote risk doubled is even smaller.
I'm thinking along the lines of we get worried, we get hung up on a small risk, but we make it a bigger risk in our lives by maybe taxing another system.
That's what happens. That's exactly it. Okay? So like looking at cigarette smoking. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones. I'll get into these arguments all the time. Well, if I stop smoking, I'll gain weight. Well, let's understand how this works. Okay, cigarette smoking is a guarantee that you're going to develop emphysema. It's a guarantee that you're going to get chronic bronchitis. And it's almost a guarantee that if you live long enough, keyword, that you're going to get either heart disease or cancer, maybe both. Okay, so the weight gain is something that you can moderate, something you can treat after the fact, but you certainly can't fix death. When you die, you're done. When you develop that lung cancer, it's not a heck of a lot of fun to treat it. It's something better prevented than treated. So what are we looking at here? What we're looking at is a philosophy. The philosophy is don't get lost in the weeds. All right? Don't focus on the small things. Well, I'm going to have organic chicken. And at the same point, you're going out there and you're doing stupid by drinking too much alcohol. Okay, that's going to tear you up as well. Or I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make sure that my eggs, they're free-range hens, X, Y, and Z for whatever the reasons are. It doesn't get you anything except for spending more money. Arguably, the eggs might taste a little bit better. Try taking fresh eggs. I think you'd be surprised how much better they are even still. But just the same, focusing on the small problems at the cost of the greater ones is a big mistake now. It's always been a mistake. Focus on relative risk. Like your car, okay? You stand a very real chance of dying in your car of a wreck. So why would you buy a lousy car with bad protection? Okay? So you go out there and you buy one of those little Austin Coopers. You get hit by another car. You're on the I-4, you're done. You might as well be driving down the street in a telephone booth, if you remember what those look like. Okay? So the long and short of it is that if you know that you're at risk for something, moderate that risk. The big risks can be far more effective to moderate than the small ones.
Check it out, suffernomore.com, suffernomore.com, and stagesoflifevitamins.com, stagesoflifevitamins.com, and here's more contact information.
Our phone number is 407-679-3337, and our website is stagesoflife.net. We're located in Longwood at 1917 Booth Circle. That's right off of I-4 and 434. And let's see, our office hours are Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5. The health store that Rob mentioned with all of our nutraceuticals is open during those office hours, but we're also on the web, as I said, at stagesoflife.net, and you can purchase your nutraceuticals at your leisure, and we will ship them to you.